It's Legends territory, Braun and Kratz, and thank you to the Players Alumni Association for putting this together. For more info on your favorite former players, go to baseballalumni.com. And let's get to our guest out of Sikeston, North Dakota, which I need to hear more about, by the way. An RBI machine in the early 2000s, top 5 MVP finisher in 2005, career best 42 homers in 2006, and led the American League in slugging and OPS that year. A-plus nickname, too, Kratz. One of my favorites for a long time. Agree?
Agree. Pronk, you can't get – we got to hear the story about that, even though he may not want to be called that as an Uber driver now for his kids. But, hey, we'll see what happens.
Also not a real Uber driver. It's a private Uber driver, okay?
Private.
Travis Hafner joining us right now on Legends territory. Pronk, if we can still call you that. I'm sure you eventually learned to love the nickname. How you doing, Travis?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Really good, really good. Let's dive into that for the younger crowd that doesn't know the origin and doesn't know about the nickname. I know that was a big deal for me for a long time with nicknames in Major League Baseball. So I think you had one of the best in the early 2000s. Do you agree?
I loved it. I preferred it to Travis. I really liked the Ring of Pron. I had it on all my gloves. Not that I really ever wore a glove, but I put it on my bats, and I really liked it. So I got called up in 2002, and I was playing with the Rangers at the time, and we were in Cleveland. And some guys like Bill Selby, Lee Stevens, they were kind of watching me play, and they're like, "What do you think of this Hafner kid?" They're like, "He's a little bit raw. He's kind of a project." And then that following offseason, I got traded to Cleveland. So Bill Selby was still there. He was calling me project. And a lot of the guys are just calling me like, "What's up, big donkey?" Just being a big guy. So I had a couple of people calling me project, a couple of people calling me donkey. So we put them together. We had Pronky. Our first road trip was to Toronto, so I was Le Pronk for that trip. And then it just shortened up to Pronk, and I absolutely loved it.
That's awesome that you embraced that name. But you said your first call up. Take us through exactly how that went, because a lot of people don't really know how call-ups go. You got stuck in a hotel for 3 days before you even got an opportunity to step on a big league field?
Yeah. So I think at the time, Rafael Palmeiro and somebody else was they were banged up, but they're going to go during BP and test it out and see how they felt. So I got called up to Chicago. And I kind of got the instructions of hey, these two guys, either one of them could go on the DL. So, just be ready to go. So it's 5 o'clock. The game starts at 7. I'm full panic, never been called up to the big leagues, in my hotel doing high knees, stretching out, karaoke, all of this stuff. And then they called and they said, hey, they showed some improvement, give it another day. And then you're your heart's just racing. And next day, same thing. And then I got a call of hey, they're both good to go, so you're actually going to go join the AAA team in Calgary, which at the time was about 20 degrees.
Oh, my gosh. Wait, so why couldn't you be at the ballpark?
I don't know. I think, several years ago, if you weren't on the active roster, you couldn't be at the ballpark.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right. And this is something that they tried to change, but teams have figured out a way to manipulate it. It's something that people don't even know about, and let alone the fact somebody that had a fringe Hall of Fame career like yours, to go through this. This is what teams do. They used to send guys, and they would sit them there. So you spent 3 days there, and then you flew to Calgary, where it was 20 degrees, and you played in how many games?
We played in 3 there, and then went to Edmonton, and I think one of our games got snowed out. And then the next day we had to play to get the game in. It was one of the coldest games I've ever played in.
And then how soon after that did you get called up?
So I want to say it was a couple months later. I was doing really well in AAA. And I remember we played out in Fresno. So we were in Oklahoma City. We played in Fresno. So it's always a 4 a.m. bus to the Oklahoma City airport. We'd always fly to Dallas. And then from there we flew to, I think, LA, and then it was an hour bus ride. So our day started at 4 a.m. We got in at 6 p.m. to the ballpark like an hour before the game. I just remember playing that game in like the 4th or 5th inning, just being like, man, I can't wait till this game is over so I can go to the hotel and sleep. And then in like the 9th inning, Bobby Jones calls me over. He's like, hey, you got called up to the big leagues, 6 a.m. flight tomorrow. And I'm just like, I'll deal with it just because I'm so excited to go to the big leagues. But that was like 2 flights, and then left early in the morning and got into Detroit. Kind of same thing, like during the game. So I think I probably got there around like 7:30, and then ended up pinch hitting in the 9th inning.
Yeah, so you were exhausted, but you can't be tired when you get called up to the big leagues. I get that.
No, you got so much adrenaline, you're just riding the highs.
I get that. What was it like sitting in the minor leagues, putting up 20 homers, back to back to back years, but being behind a guy like Palmeiro? What is that thought process where you're sitting there like, I have a shot, I think?
Yeah, I mean, Texas was loaded with first basemen. Even when I was in low A, we drafted Carlos Pena in the first round, and he came in and, he did great things. And then after that, we drafted Teixeira. We had a guy, Sean Gallagher, who was our minor league player of the year, who was like 2 levels ahead of us. And then you have Palmeiro. So, we were just absolutely stacked at first base. So, they did a pretty good job of like, hey, you're not just playing for, the Rangers organization. You're playing for all the other teams as well. So go out there, play your best, put up numbers, and, somebody's going to notice, and, you can be a valuable trade chip. And ultimately got called up with the Rangers, played a couple months, and then got traded to Cleveland that off season.
They always tell us that in the minor leagues. They always were saying that. Did you believe it? Because when we kind of crossed a little bit. We never played against each other in the minor leagues, but that same time, I started in 2002, and you got called to the big leagues in 2002. Did you believe it? Did you believe when they said you're playing for the 29 other teams?
Yeah, so I would say yes and no. It was frustrating when you would see guys that you were playing against, like moving up or getting called up. And, I just didn't really have that opportunity since we were so loaded at first base. But, I did know that if I didn't produce or, play well, that I wouldn't be around too long. So I had to go out and produce and put up numbers. And, thankfully it worked out where I got a shot with Cleveland.
Now, you were a 31st round pick. I love having anybody on this show that was picked after me because I was a 29th round pick. So you can look at me as the $1,000 bonus baby. But as a 31st round pick, did you feel like that was holding you back too?
Well, I went to a junior college, Cali County in Kansas. So we were able to do a draft and follow. 96, I got drafted, and I thought I was going to go, kind of higher than I did. I was expecting more of like the 10 to 15 range, but I went in the 31st round, and they wanted me to go back to school, which was great. Like I needed another year of development, coming from North Dakota, like I was super raw. So I went back, and then I signed probably the day before the draft. Actually, we ended up playing in the Junior College World Series. We were in the last game, the finals, and the scout for Texas rode our bus back home. And every time there was a break, we would do these little mini negotiations, and I'd call my parents and be like, "Hey, this is what they offered. Can I sign for this?" So it was pretty unique, and then I ended up signing during the bus trip.
That's crazy. So if you had a big game, would you go, all right, I need a little more now?
I know, right? Hit a home run in the finals and be like, hey, the price is going up.
Yeah. Did you hit a home run in the finals?
Yeah, we won 4-2. So
up the price.
Yeah, it did work. I got more than after my freshman year, so it somewhat worked.
Yeah.
Can you explain draft and follow too? So that doesn't exist anymore. So for people that don't know what it was, how did that work? And do you think it was helpful, or do you not miss having that around in Major League Baseball anymore?
Yeah, I was a pretty big fan of the draft and follow. It's where a team can draft you and kind of have no intentions of signing you. And I believe this was only for a junior college. So after your freshman year of junior college, a team would draft you and say hey, I like the potential. We'd love for you to go back to school and, continue to develop. And then, if we see some good things, I will have the opportunity to sign you before the draft, or else you can re-enter the draft. So, I thought it was good. Like, I was kind of loyal to Texas because they drafted me and took a chance on me, and like, I kind of wanted to sign with them ultimately.
So you went back. You keep saying that develop more. Do you feel like you would have developed more in the minor leagues, or when you went to junior college, it gave you an opportunity to maybe fail and continue to grow into some things?
Yeah, like I would say, me personally, like I was so raw coming out of North Dakota, that the jump to junior college was huge. I think the fastest pitcher I ever saw in North Dakota was probably like 83 miles an hour. Um, you know, Actually, after high school, I went to an Atlanta Braves camp, and they offered me, you know, $1,000 or something to sign, and that'd be a huge jump. Like, going from facing, typically like something in the 70s to all of a sudden facing guys throwing 90 with a wood bat. But definitely that extra year of junior college helped me a ton. We had great coaches there, and Dave and Darren Burrows and Scott Hennessy, and they all played pro ball, and they really taught me a ton of like what my hitting approach ultimately became. So I was able to really develop, and in junior colleges, like practices can be pretty tough. Like you can play multiple games and then you're driving home and you just pull right into the weight room or pull into the field and you're scrimmaging. So that helped a lot, I think, with like my work ethic and mental toughness. And so that second year of junior college, where you're a little bit of a leader on the team as well, like was really beneficial.
All right, so before we get to some big league talk, give me the lowdown on life growing up in super small town North Dakota, where you were valedictorian in a class of
8.
Wow. So
I would say that I was in the top 10 of my class.
You were definitely in the top 10, and your friends were decided for you. I mean, 8 people in that class. Like, what if you didn't like a few of them?
You ain't getting away from them. You're in every class with them. So yeah, I mean, I grew up on a farm, which did a lot of farm work growing up, and that was really tough work. And you don't really know anything different. So I really didn't like farming. So I remember when I got to college, that was something that my coaches would use to motivate me. Like, hey, if you don't pick it up, you're gonna end up back on the farm, and then it just your work ethic goes to another level. But yeah, it's very rural community. You're driving 2 hours to a mall or a Walmart, so we were really in the country.
Wow, we've been told to ask what hot dish is. Can you explain?
Ooh, my kids absolutely love this. It's basically a hamburger helper, but it's like noodles. You throw tomato sauce on it, and then you put a hamburger on it, and you mix it all up, and it's phenomenal. It's like a North Dakota delicacy. And like my kids sometimes are really picky, but on hot dish night, they just destroy like 2 or 3 plates each. So that's what we do to try to get them to grow some.
Well, I never even heard of that. Had you, Kratzy?
Never heard of that.
Jeez.
So we also have these things called caramel rolls. I don't know if you guys have heard of those, but it's basically like a cinnamon roll, but instead of like the frosting on the top, it's just all doused in caramel, and you put like a stick of butter on top of it and you melt it, and might be one of the best things you guys have ever had. So if you ever get to North Dakota, Minnesota, you can find some breakfast cafes there that have them, and it's worth a try. I mean, it's a good way to start off your day with 3,500 calories.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Good little breakfast pregame before you hit the farm. It makes sense. You got to load up on the carbs. Who did you root for? Were you a big sports fan growing up? Because obviously there's no pro teams out there.
Yeah, so we had like the old school satellite dish. So I watched the Braves and the Orioles, and then as I got to like college, I was actually like a Cleveland Indians fan, but mostly like an Orioles fan growing up. Loved Cal Ripken. He was my favorite player, and certainly Eddie Murray. Like, he was one of my favorite hitters to watch too. So my first year with Cleveland, Eddie Murray was our hitting coach, and that was fantastic to have somebody that you kind of watched and idolized growing up as your hitting coach. So that was really great.
Who introduced you to baseball, or was baseball not your first sport?
I would say that it was like baseball cards. Like, for whatever reason, I was a baseball card junkie. Like, in our town, we had this was like a drugstore that sold baseball cards, and I just went and like any money that I made, I bought baseball cards, and like I knew everybody's stats and all that stuff. So I would watch games, and in North Dakota, you drive tractor when you're like 8, 9, 10 years old. So we actually had our radio. You would hit the button, like the seek button, and it would go around the whole thing, and just like we only had one channel. And certain days they would broadcast a Twins game. So that was like the best way to pass time, was listening to Twins games out in the tractor.
Wow. Hey, some people, Kratz, make money off cards. Like, you really made money off cards because it turned into your career. So that worked out. All right. So let's fast forward. So my first question on the major league side is, Kratz and me were looking over your stats. For example, the year I mentioned, 2006, you lead the American League in slugging and OPS. You had a career high 42 home runs, and you had a major league record 5 grand slams before the AllStar break that year, yet you weren't an AllStar. This is your time to say, what the hell happened? Who was blocking you as one of the best hitters in the league? And we didn't have all MLB team back then, which I do like because it looks at the whole season. But I'm like, you didn't even need that. You were crushing the first half. So what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really good first half, and that was probably like the best stretch of my career. I think this was at the time when the fans would vote for the starter, and I can't remember exactly who the starter was, but first base was pretty loaded, first base and DH, and then the subs were or the reserves were voted on by like the team that was in the All-Star, like that manager. So the White Sox had Konerko and Tomey, so it's really tough to argue with those guys. I mean, they had wonderful years the year before, won the World Series, and then came out and had great years in 06. So, I was happy that I was playing really well. I was kind of bummed that I didn't make it. Like, I really wanted to just say that I made it to that game. And, I would have loved to have been in the home run derby, but, it didn't happen. And, there's a lot of great players that year.
Some of the years, like through that time when you were just absolutely destroying the baseball, Ortiz was winning some of those awards. He was winning the Silver Slugger. He was getting some of the, the All-Star appearances. Does it hurt a little bit now looking back that there was some like steroid allegations during that time with Big Papi? And how does that, or was it just one of those things that, hey, it didn't quite work out?
Yeah, probably more the latter of just, it didn't quite work out. Him and Manny were such a force in the middle of that offense, and they were putting up massive numbers, and they were winning. And just sometimes you're just in an era where there are guys that are just really putting up monster numbers. So I tried to do what I could do, and it just didn't work out on making the All-Star team. But I was able to go out and be productive.
I blame Pierzynski. Him and the Sox winning in 05. I mean,
the White Sox
screwed over 06.
Yeah. If they lose in the playoffs, somebody else is picking the team. So it is his fault.
Yep,
exactly.
That's fair. I like that. Sosha would have picked you because I think they beat Sosha. So yeah, Sosha would have picked you.
Yeah.
What were those years like for you? I mean, you mentioned like small town North Dakota, don't want to be working on the farm. Went through some crap in the minors. You're just behind a lot of people that are really talented. And then you end up being a 40-plus homer guy on a Cleveland team that you said you were more of a fan of in college.
Yeah. I mean, I loved watching those guys like Tomey and Manny and Bell and Fryman, like Kenny Lofton. They had like so many good players. Baerga, like they were just 1 through 9, they were pretty stacked. But yeah, like to just, I think when you first get to the big leagues, you just want to establish yourself and become a regular. And, it took a while. Like I made it up. I got sent down with Texas, and then with Cleveland, I made it up, kind of got banged up a little bit, got sent down, and then came up. And that second half, and then the next year, I was able to kind of establish myself as a regular. And it's really cool. Like at that point, it becomes all about winning. But, to your point, like it's, sometimes you would sit back and say like, hey, this was pretty cool. Like from the farm in North Dakota. And now I'm, being able to play every day in the big leagues and actually come out here and perform pretty well. And you're facing the best competition in the world. So that was really cool, and I was happy to get to that point.
What was your welcome to the big leagues moment? Was there a time when you faced someone or something happened where you're like, oh shit, this is it?
Well, kind of like a couple things. Like, I think the first actual start I got was, or the second start I got was against Jose Lima, and he had like a 5.5 ERA or something like that, where he's one of those guys that you kind of watch on TV and you're kind of like, oh, if I was up there, like, I could probably hit that pretty easily. And I remember like Lima just had a filthy changeup, and I was just like, holy cow, like all these guys are really good. Like they were painting great off speed stuff. They would locate their off speed stuff, and I was like, yeah, this ain't going to be as easy as I thought. So just like everybody being like so good, and you have to bring it every night, or you're going to go for 4 with a hat trick.
So Lima time was your big league moment. When you had your best season, 1,000+ OPS, maybe you didn't even look at OPS at that point. Like, were you sitting there like, yeah, like I knew I could do this. Like I knew back in, junior college that I would be this type of player? Or were there some times when you were like, hey, I got to surprise myself?
Yeah, I mean, I remember after my first full season in Low A, I had a talk with our farm director, and he was kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen after this season. You kind of struggled. I'm not sure if you're going to make it out of spring training. So just to kind of have that, flash before you of like, wow, one year into this, and it might not end. So, just I was always, I always probably worked hard at my craft, and that just kind of like sent me to another level of like, man, like if this doesn't happen, like I have no idea what I'm to do. So I try to like just outwork everybody. That was kind of like my goal, and thankfully was able to go out and produce and move up the ladder.
So you spent a lot of time at DH. Obviously, there was some first base mixed in there, but in today's game, I've been around quite a few ball players that have said, you know what, if I'm just DH, it's hard for me to focus and I don't know what to do, and developing the routine is difficult. What would be your advice to them both on how you overcame that, and also for some players that might not be like, let's say it's an outfielder and he's a big dude, like say Eloy Jimenez, right? He's not the best fielder. I mean, it's no secret. You watched him out there, he's gotten hurt. Like, to just appreciate that you're in the game and actually could preserve your body better if you're playing that position, because you're a huge dude in the outfield and might not be the spot for you.
Right. So yeah, like I would say at least 50% of people, like you throw them at DH and they're like, I hate it because I'm not in the game. And next thing you know, like I'm just up at home plate and not ready to go. So I would do, like when we were out on defense, like I was never really out watching. I was always like doing cardio or stretching or hitting in the cage, kind of watching the game on a TV just to, see the umpire zone, different things like that. And obviously like when there's 2 outs, like to be ready to go. But I did it like a ton of cardio and hitting just to kind of like keep me in the game. And, during the game, you'd probably take like 200 swings. So that's kind of what I did to keep me in the game. And you're actually almost doing more than if you're out there playing.
You feel like you shouldn't have been taking so many swings? You ever look back at it and say, maybe I didn't need to?
No, that's a good point. Like I ended up having like shoulder issues and wrist issues and elbow issues, and like kind of like everything I did, like it was, I'm not gonna not make it because I didn't work hard enough. So, just lifting, like I'd spend a lot of time in the weight room. I was pretty extreme in everything, love to hit, do all that stuff. So, was that the best thing for your body? And, maybe adding to your longevity a little bit? Probably not. But, I felt like that's what I needed to get ready, both physically and mentally. And that just kind of, like if I put in all that time, you're down 0-2 in the count and you're like, listen, I put in a lot of work for this. I'm not going to give up to this pitcher right now. So, if anything, I thought all the work kind of helped me mentally as much as anything.
I love that. I talk about that all the time with the high school kids that I coach. Like, The only regret you have is the work you don't put in, and you live that out. Let's go to some of your teammates, guys you came up with. Any good stories from, a CC Sabathia? Cliff Lee was one of my favorite teammates. He kind of was up and down in the minor leagues, struggled in the big leagues. Any good Cliff Lee or CC stories?
I remember with, both great guys, both great teammates. I have a hard time just pulling up stories on demand, but there was this one with Cliff Lee. I remember he went out, he threw an absolute gem, and during the game, like ESPN kind of interviewed him, like in our dugout or just below the dugout in our tunnel, and they asked him this question, and it was like so many numbers that nobody could follow it, but something like, what's more important, your home record of 10-1 with this ERA, and or is it just your overall, ERA, WHIP, and it was a ridiculous amount of numbers. But Cliff just stood there like a deer in headlights, and he's like, "Could you repeat those numbers?" And we had that on video, and we would watch it all the time, and it was great. But Cliff was great. Like he could be throwing a no-hitter like in the 7th inning and being like, why isn't anybody talking to me? I don't care about the no-hitter. I just want people to talk to me. So Cliff was like so laid back, and you wouldn't even realize he was the starting pitcher. Like, all of a sudden he would just run out. Like there were times where you go hit in the cage before the game, go out and run, and then you come sit in the dugout and Cliff was sitting next to you, and all of a sudden he runs out and you're like, oh, I guess Cliff's pitching today.
Yeah, let's be honest. Cliff was a little annoying. Come on. I texted him before this to see if he had any good stories about you. He's like, oh, I have all the stories. No, he didn't even respond. He was on his start days. I would almost rather him be a little bit more quiet on his start days.
Isn't he that much of a talker?
He just was like, he was like the kid that was like, he was always so locked into like your conversation. He'd pop up around the corner and be like, hey, I heard what you said. And I'm like, what? Like, lock into your game. He's like, it's okay. By the time I played with him in 11, 12, and 13, he was well established. So, I can't imagine how he was when he was a younger pitcher.
Yeah, and he had that Invisa heater. He could just throw a heater down the middle, and people are swinging and missing. You're like, he's got the gift.
Jeez,
definitely.
That's crazy. Craziest teammate? Is there somebody that you played with who was just kind of a wild child?
So I would say like Trot Nixon was a guy, he was with the Red Sox for a long time, and he kind of came over in 2007. And we won the division. That was the only time we made the playoffs. And Trot had this ability to like make everything fun. Like normally if you 2 or 3 times a year, you're going to lose a game 15-0, and you could sit and grind that loss and just be like, this is miserable, and it just eats at you. And like Trot Nixon's going to do something to make everybody laugh and just say like, screw it, it's one game, who cares? So just kind of like his perspective on just being able to have fun and enjoy the game and not make it bigger than it is. Like Trot was great. He'd say anything at any time.
So you played when you got to the big leagues, you were pre-social media era. And by the time you finished in 2013, it was really kind of just around when some of the more active social media, like the daily, like Twitter grind, stuff like that, was getting going. How different was it? Because it's not like you played that long ago. You're in your mid-40s. But how different was it even during that time period, right? Like to give, your non-player example here, I'm like, when I was in college, we didn't have any of that crap. So things changed once you have that, because then suddenly everybody's got a freaking camera. The paparazzi turned into billions of people. So how much do you think that's changed where, many players around the game nowadays, they're not going out as much. It's become more of like a video game, chill in the room, post game, where obviously, like you had teammates you played with and you're like, all right, don't stay out too late, dude. Like 3 a.m., not 6 a.m. Okay.
Yep. I want to say back in our day, it was drunkathletes.com, I think, where like, if somebody got, plastered at the bar, they might end up on the website. So, but yeah, like today it's crazy. Like with social media, like, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it to like if somebody sees you out, they're probably going to take pictures and post it on social media, and like you're depending on what you're doing, you'll have to answer to the organization potentially for that. And, are you doing everything you can to prepare to win the next day's game and to be as good as you can be? So it is a challenge, but it's just kind of one of those sacrifices that you'd be willing to make to play the game at the highest level.
Did you ever come across any of that in your playing days where they would have meetings with the players and be like, hey guys, don't do this, or be careful when you're out? Not just be careful, but like, we don't want you out that much. Or, if you're with certain players that were just hitting the streets every night.
Yeah, I mean, every spring training, MLB security would come in and they'd kind of give you like, hey, this is the newest way that you can get in trouble, whether it's like, gambling or identity theft or, going out or getting involved with the wrong people. So we're always kind of well aware of like what could happen. And, so it was good to have that heads up, just, like, hey, this like legitimately can happen to you. And, you'd see examples of it, and, it's a pretty good deterrent.
Also, Kratz, he was in Cleveland. So, I mean, I don't want to shit on Cleveland too much, but it's not like it's not New York City. It's not Miami. I think that's just probably the best way to describe it, Eric, right?
I mean, I think if you're there, I think there's probably some sneaky places. Was there any nightlife in Cleveland, or was it just games, home, and hot dish?
Well, games and hot dish were the staples, but I was more like I really like the good restaurants, and there's like some great restaurants in Cleveland that we would go out to. So, usually when you're at home, you got your family, so you're going home right away or going out to eat if it's like a day game. So, it was a great city. Like, I loved it there.
Yeah, I love Cleveland. I think it's gotten a bad rep. At least it's not Detroit, right? Isn't that what they say?
Is that what they say?
We used to stay in the casino in Detroit, so there's some good stories that come out of there. Like, some guys had some pretty rough nights.
I'm sure. Well, back to Cleveland. Take us to the bug game. What you were deep under the throngs of the stadium, but like what is your like sticking, lasting memory from that game?
Yeah, so there's in Cleveland there's these things called midges, and like twice a year they just we lived on the lake when we were there, so twice a year there would be midges that would just be like all over your house. You open up the door and they're just covering your face. So it was crazy, but like I remember that game, they were out, and it's one of those things that nobody knew necessarily at the time, but if you try to put on insect repellent, it just even makes it worse. It's like food or like a beer for the midges or something like that. So you can see like the Yankees were doing it. And I think it just made it worse on their players. But like probably the lasting image I have is like Fausto Carmona just like dialed in, throwing his 98-mile-an-hour two-seamers, and just like I just have that memory of him taking signs and just bugs everywhere, and him just not even flinching, just locked in. I loved it.
Were you guys like giggling in the dugout? Like they're using bug spray? They don't know.
No, it was weird. Like, I mean, my concern was, what if I get up there and like the pitcher's in his motion, he gets right here and a bug flies in my eye. So, it wasn't easy, like on either side, pitching or hitting. They're just all over, and for whatever reason, they're attracted to your face. So it was really annoying, but like ultimately we won the game, and that was kind of the narrative, was just that it was the bug game.
That's crazy.
That's awesome.
So from a playoff component, obviously Cleveland has not been able to pull off a dub. You guys had some good chances there, and then you fast forward even to past your playing career. Were you still following Cleveland? Like, were you like at the edge of your seat for the 16 World Series with Cleveland taking on the Cubbies? Like, can we get one for this city?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think in 2015, I started working with Cleveland in like a special assistant role, like doing some video scouting and, going out to spring training occasionally. So, I followed the organization closely. I was at the game in 2016. It was phenomenal. I was able to take my 11-year-old son to that game. It was like such a fun time. And remember Rajay Davis hitting that 3-run homer off Chapman to tie the game, and just like you couldn't watch that and not jump up and down and scream. It was insane. So it was a great game with it didn't end the way that we wanted, but that was such a great experience.
How did that atmosphere compare to the atmosphere of when you were playing there? Because Jacobs Field, now Progressive Field, was sold out for I don't know how many hundreds of games. It was just an atmosphere. I remember hearing people talk about driving out to Cleveland from where I live outside of Philly to go see a game because it was like everybody was going to them.
Yep. It was the hottest ticket in town. At the time the Cavs weren't very good, and I believe the Browns were in Baltimore. And then you got this all-star lineup that just goes out there and it seemed like put up 10 runs a night and hit home runs and doubles, and they were just fun to watch, and they were winning. And they had a crazy sellout streak. I want to say it was 455 games in a row. So when you get sellouts there, like even now, like fireworks night, weekend games, they get sellouts, and that place is rocking. It's great. And I remember that playoff, that year being in the playoffs, like that was the most fun I've ever had playing. And you could feel the stadium shake at times, which is really cool. Like it's a phenomenal atmosphere.
Do you feel like LeBron stole your thunder at any time in Cleveland?
Well, I mean, deservedly so. Like he was, he's one of the best players of all time. But, that eventually became the hottest ticket in town, even though I would say Cleveland probably first and foremost is a Browns town, and then probably the Indians. But when LeBron was in town, like that was the hottest ticket. You'd have celebrities flying in all the time. So just to be in the arena and, you look over and Jay-Z and Beyonce are there, or, whoever, like it was a hot ticket.
Did you come across him? I mean, I know he hit probably some games, not much, but did you come across him at any point?
Yeah, I was able to meet him one time, and it was cool. Like, I mean, he's an incredible presence, and just one of the best basketball players of all time. So it was just cool to have him there playing, all of his home games there for a number of years.
Yeah, and he made you look small, right? He had some height on you.
He could jump a little higher too.
A little bit.
But you could hit the ball farther, and that's way cooler.
Yeah, and also, actually, you can hit a ball farther, and I don't know if LeBron ever shattered a backboard, and is it true that you did that?
I shattered a backboard.
Wow.
At a high school practice. So kind of like randomly, like one of the things that I was obsessed with was I wanted to be able to dunk a basketball from the time I was probably like a second grader. So, back at this time, there wasn't YouTube to just, hey, how do I jump higher? Like you would have to go buy a Sports Illustrated, and then in the back of the Sports Illustrated, you'd see these like advertisements for like Skybound or these like platform shoes. So I got like all of that stuff. I had like more of these like jumping program pamphlets, but I was like obsessed with it. And then, when I got to high school, I was able to do it. And we'd go to basketball camp and I would do some dunk contests. And probably one of the coolest things was one time my freshman year of college, we were in the gym because we got rained out. So we were in the gym. And when we were in the gym, like they absolutely ran the crap out of us. So I was able to, like the coach made a bet with me. He's like, if you can do a two-handed 360, we won't have running today. But if you don't do it, you have double. So at that point, we probably would have been dead. But he gave me like one warm-up. I wasn't even close. And then I got like a two-handed 360 down. So we got out of running for the day. And it was a highlight of my dunking career.
No doubt. Did you have the jump soles?
I had the jump soles.
Oh, I had the jump soles too. And we just moved to our last house here. 94 different moves that we've made since I was in college. And I found my jump soles, and they were rotted out, like the straps. Do you have the black ones or the white ones?
So I have the white ones, and I don't know how like every person that wore these didn't blow out their ankles. Like I think they eventually came out with like the whole shoe, but just the fact that you would strap these onto your shoes, and sometimes you'd be running, and if you didn't have them on right, they would like twist off, and you're like, how did I not just blow out an ACL right here? But I'd put them back on and get after it.
There were definitely some lawsuits, and they had to make some tweaks.
Not back then. You were getting 6 to 10 inches on your vertical, guaranteed on the jump soles.
It's all that matters. I just want to jump higher.
You are not suing for that crap. So when you did shatter the backboard, did you like scream out, like feeling as if you're Shaq?
Absolutely. Like, I want to say at that time, Shaq was the man and he was breaking backboards. So to do that, like, I wasn't upset at all. It was like, kind of like a little legend in small town North Dakota, like, oh, this dude shattered a backboard, so I was riding the highs of that.
How much different would your career have been if you had grown up like Tripp and Knox and I forget, Blake? Like if you were in Florida playing all these games, like do you feel like, because you had wear and tear throughout your big league career that ultimately, diminished some of your output? Do you feel like if you would have been playing in Florida, playing 100 games as a kid, you would have gotten burned out, or do you think you would have been that much better?
It's a great question. It's something that we deal with all the time down here. Like, how much is too much? At the time, like I played like 20 games a year in North Dakota was it. We played 20 games in the summer, and the rest of the year it was snowing. But I do feel like there was value in, I did like track and field, I did basketball. So you get to play like other sports year round and train, and then you got like your 2 months of baseball. Down here in Florida, you can literally play all year and never stop. And there kind of gets to be this thing of like more reps. I don't want to fall behind, but we try to give our kids, 4 or 5 months off a year. They play fall and they play spring, but at some point it gets to be like fall ball, spring ball, and then you play in the summer. So it's a ton of baseball, like even more so than like a pro season. You're playing, 10, 11 months out of the year. So I do think that gets to be kind of extreme. And it's good for kids to play other sports and to develop other skills.
Yeah, it's a tough balance where it's like you don't want to tell the kid like, hey, I know it's nice out and you can play some games, but I don't want you to. Like, it's probably a tough sell to a kid that doesn't understand that, right?
Yeah, but like I don't want a 9-year-old necessarily training. Like 9-year-old just go play like flag football or basketball and like use the sport to like get you more athletic. But in baseball, there's not a ton of, you're not going to develop a ton of athleticism in baseball. So that's why I think playing other sports is so important, and you're not actually like having a trainer running sprints and, which if that's what you choose to do, it's not the worst thing in the world. Like you get better from that. But like at this age, like I want kids, having fun rather than like going to a trainer and training and developing their skills that way.
Just be like, go shatter some backboards.
Go shatter backboards.
Yeah.
Jump soles.
Hey, Pronk, awesome catching up with you. Really appreciate the time. And quick on our end for anyone watching Legends Territory on YouTube, you can also listen to this on Apple and Spotify. And thanks to the Players Alumni Association for setting this up. For more info on your favorite former players, hit up baseballalumni.com. But again, Travis, really good catching up with you, man, and reminiscing for a bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I love the show. You guys do a fantastic job, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, man.